Time is 7:01. I will call the Plan Commission meeting to order. Could I have roll call, please?
Sorry.
He's calling in his answer.
Mayor Grant.
Here.
Iverson.
Here.
Hutton.
Here.
Polash.
Here.
Poppy. Here. Split. We have a quorum.
All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from February 16th?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 16th.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. First action item tonight is a certified survey map for Rogers and Rogers at 300 Watson Street. Any questions, discussions, or motions?
Is this just a common thing when a single entity owns 3 or 4 lots that they just combine them into one? Is that the reasoning for it?
Well,
Go ahead, Eric.
do you want me to address that? The reasoning for it was when I opened, the restaurant needed to get opened up into the hotel.
Okay,
And so that dividing wall has now a penetration that connects the two.
the Fox and Crow building.
Correct.
So it would be 3,
302.
okay.
So Sue said that with that being done, that it needed to come under one address. And I extended the fire alarm system into the new building that's connected with that building. So it really technically now is considered one.
Okay,
So it had to be resurveyed for that
Okay.
reason.
gotcha.
Correct?
My only other question is, the next 2 are empty lots. Does that pose a problem later on? If he would sell those 2 lots, then it would just be re-surveyed again, correct?
If he does, there was a building there, but there was the fire.
Right,
And then the
correct.
property was demoed, so yes.
Okay.
That's correct. I don't think he has any intention of doing anything now.
Right.
By the way, I didn't introduce myself. I apologize. My name is Don Lenz with Green Lake Surveying Company, and I am now a division of general engineering out of Portage. I still have an office in Green Lake. I am the sole entity of the, so I'm the professional that does all the survey work. Coming out of our review, both, all the surveys that come out of both companies, so. And this one was passed by Mr. Rogers to have this thing done, so that's why I'm here.
Those are my 2 questions.
I think the intention is to put a concrete patio out
That-
that side anyway, so it's probably better that they're all together.
Okay.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve this?
I'll make a motion to approve the certified survey map.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the certified survey map of 300 Watson Street, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved.
Did we have one abstention, just for the record?
Oh, and you abstain or?
I would assume you abstained.
Yes.
Yeah, just for the record.
I have, on the certified survey map, there is a signature that needs to be signed by the city administrator as well as the chair for the Ripon Planning Commission.
That would be
Be
him
right
and
here
me.
and right there.
You too?
Yep.
May I?
Yes.
You may.
Approach the bench.
That was good. Careful, he'll hold you in contempt. Don't badger the witness.
And date it. You bet. Thank you.
Next time.
All right, moving on to our other action item, zoning code reviews for residential zoning districts, PUD, and tourist rooming houses. Adam has a nice presentation.
Yes, I have a nice presentation just to kind of give you an idea of what the heck we're talking about and why. I have copies of the presentation if anybody really wants one. You do? If you don't, it's fine. Okay. So basically, I wanted to put this together because we had talked a little bit about this last Plan Commission meeting, distributed some materials. So just wanted to talk through some things. There's some draft ordinance changes in the packet for residential zoning. So why are we looking at doing this? Well, it all started with an opportunity for the city of Ripon to participate in a study with the Congress for New Urbanism and the League of Wisconsin Municipalities looking at, it's called Project Code Reform. We were a Wisconsin case study for zoning and affordable housing. So we had the opportunity to work with the Congress for New Urbanism to talk about our issues within our zoning code. That then they made suggestions, which I think that report was also attached last month, to what to do with our zoning code. From that, we were able to work with Ayers and Associates, that is a consulting firm. We got free technical assistance to help draft changes to the zoning code based on the suggestions from that study as being a case study from the CNU. Ultimately, right here on the far side or on the right hand side, we were a case study with Eau Claire, Horicon, Waukesha, and Wanakee, and they came out with a user's guide. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities came out with a user guide for Wisconsin neighborhood affordability. And really what it does is it sets an entire platform for code reform across the state to promote flexibility, availability, and affordability in housing, okay? With that, why are there current issues? The current conditions in Ripon and many of our historic neighborhoods, things that, the neighborhoods that we, I think, as a community value the most, with some of the nicest architecture, nicest lots, nicest builds, our current codes are very restrictive and lack flexibility. So these are properties, including 565 Watson, 513 Woodside, 522 Ransom, and 602 Watson. Some of these are pretty noticeable, like Jason Mansmith's house, my house. Just to give you perspective, okay? Current code is saying lot coverage is 30% in an R1 district. Every one of these properties in our historic district would be bumping up against that or is already above it, okay? So just from that perspective alone, anybody that has a house in a historic district, if something were to happen to that house, they would not be able to rebuild that house because the lots were smaller, it was developed differently, and the modern code does not, it just is not standard to the past and previous development within the community. On top of somebody at 28.5%, that property there at 565 Watson, I do not believe has a garage. They would have to come get a variance to go above the 30% to build a garage. That's not an insurmountable task, but it certainly is something that prevents or is an obstacle that people just frankly don't always like to move past. You then move into other neighborhoods, other areas, more traditional neighborhoods. So you have 216 Griswold. Who lives there, Lud?
Yeah, it looks like familiar.
Here's your mom shelter.
I'm below.
So as you
All
see,
coming.
Lud's not including the lovely pool, but he's at 33%. So he's over, you know. And I believe there had to be a variance or something issued for that property to be built out. You look at Newberry, there's 36%. You look at Pleasant Street neighborhood as well as Hope Avenue, so kind of branching out a little bit further into areas that were probably built in the 50s or 60s. You have just, down there on Hope Avenue, every one of those properties is at around 26, bumping up against 30, and then there's Gary Will's house at 37%. He had to come get a variance too.
Yep.
You then have Hope Avenue and Pleasant. All 4 of those properties there have issues. All of them have setback issues to the current code. If they were to have to rebuild, they would not be able to rebuild their current house. Okay? And then ultimately too, there are just issues with reuse in residential districts and a lack of general housing development. There has been just a lack. So we, I believe, I can't remember if it was last month, it would have been maybe last month, there was a rezoning for the property on State Street to only become a duplex. So to go from an R1 to an R2. That's that property, in terms of its overall size and whatnot, for a reuse standpoint, a duplex being, I think, well over 4,000 square feet, they could have gone to to created more units, by having a more flexible code. And then you have other properties that over time in residential districts have, for whatever reason not been developed and could have been, and now are getting to the point where something's got to happen, right? You can't just continue to let the old school, say, deteriorate in a residential district, but our current code would not allow any reuse under its current zoning. That would be it just wouldn't be possible. So the overall goal in this really is to make small code changes to allow greater flexibility for property owners and developers to increase housing availability and options and promote affordability. This is part of a corresponding effort to look into housing programs as well as a housing market study. So this is kind of the third leg of that. So you're not sitting there promoting housing only to restrict housing. you get it? So some of the things that we've looked at changing, and this gets into some of the code, and frankly, we don't have to talk about the language. We don't have to get into the nuts and bolts if you don't want to. It's kind of up to you how you want to handle this. But I just kind of want to summarize the changes and just generally the logic behind that. So in an R1 district, which is the primary residential single-family district in the community, there are 4 major things that would change in the draft. The first would be use regulations. We would add conversion duplexes and accessory dwelling units. The accessory dwelling units would be owner-occupied, 1 per lot under a conditional use. What that means, if somebody wanted to build a second living quarters in the back for like a mother-in-law suite or grandparent suite or something like that, they could do that. That's currently not allowed. A conversion duplex would be taking a single-family property and or a single-family home and converting it to a duplex. Okay, that would be an allowable use under that. That would be a change from the current code. The logic there in some cases is size of houses and demographic shifts. The houses are way big for the number of people that are going to be living there and are less attractive, as well as in terms of a reuse. If you have a very large house and somebody wants to buy it and they can convert it to a duplex, it may add value to the sale of your property. We've had properties that are large sit on the market for longer. We certainly understand that in historic districts. The downside of that is you could see a big old house turn into a duplex, but there are big old houses that are already duplexes. Okay? So that's sort of the, yeah.
So on the accessory dwelling unit portion of that, is that only referring to something that would be an attached addition to like a house? Or could it even be considered a detached, a whole nother structure?
It could be detached. Yes.
Okay.
And so the thing there is if it was within a certain amount of feet to the existing house, it would have to have the firewalls. It'd be like a garage, a detached garage. And the idea there too is in some of the historic districts and how houses were developed, there were accessory dwelling units. There, above garages, or the garage was an accessory dwelling unit. So it's becoming a more popular thing. That one would be owner occupied only, so you wouldn't be able to, the owner would have to live in either the accessory dwelling unit or the house, and it would have to be a conditional use. Okay? The height accessory dwelling units would be the same as the principal structure. And then other accessory buildings, we had at 15 feet. Sue did request that be moved up to 18 feet just because there's just issues there sometimes with people trying to get campers in storage units or in garages. Area regulations, we removed a standard saying like if a lot is greater than 80 feet or under 80 feet rule, we said, okay, let's just make one standard setback. So the front setback, you can kind of read the language there, but it will be the average of the setbacks of the building located on each side of the lot and shall not be more than 30 feet nor less than 25 feet. And then the setback of corner lots shall be no closer than the average of the setbacks of the buildings on the lots adjacent to the corner lot. So the idea there is trying to allow the property owners to decide to blend their property into the adjoining properties, because in some older parts of town, you may have some that are set up closer, some that are set up further away, and some properties have setbacks in older districts of town that are only 20 feet off, where the standard currently is 30 feet. At no way would we allow anybody to go above 25 feet. Or it'd be 25 to 30. It just builds in flexibility for someone. Instead of saying one standard, they basically have the option to go 25 to 30 if the average of the two next to them is between that. That's basically what it does. So,
Are those buildings down Fond du Lac Street even 20 feet off from?
Yeah.
Some of them seem like they're 10 or 15.
so and the other standard we do implement here is when you're looking at a residential lot. So in this district here, this is like my house, for example, up in this corner here, we are using the property line from the sidewalk. So a 30-foot setback off of that is huge. It's not the curb, it's the parcel or so just allowing a little more flexibility there is, it's time to do that in general. That's just something to clean up. And then the other side thing here is on a corner lot, having this other language in here allows a little more flexibility for the property owner, because we've had situations where people have come in and they're currently required to have a 30-foot on one side and a 30-foot on another side. And that just ends up becoming somewhat challenging at times. So we would make that, the adjacent principle of the average of the adjacent properties. Similar, the minimum rear setback would go from 25 feet, basically, an average and or 25 feet, but no less than 17. The minimum lot dimensions would drop to 6,000 square feet from, I believe, 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. The big one here is 40% lot coverage versus 30% lot coverage. So if somebody was, if somebody in any of those cases were to have to rebuild their house at 30%, most of them couldn't. At 40%, they likely could get there. On top of if somebody wanted to add an accessory dwelling unit or a garage, at 40%, there's a good likelihood that they can get there without having to get a variance. We've had at least, since I've been here in a year, I think there's been 2 requests for variances to exceed the 30% rule. And then the minimum usable floor area per family would be 500 square feet. So the whole idea there is is the minimum 500 square feet for a conversion duplex or an accessory dwelling unit. That seems very small. I think the standard was 600, so drop it to 500. So you could get down to a 500 square foot accessory dwelling unit for a second unit on the property.
Again, in the regulations, that's owner occupied, one per lot, permitted as a conditional use. That's the one we're referring to.
Yes.
Dwelling, okay.
Yep.
So definition of owner occupied is just what it says, or have we created new definitions?
We will create, there's a whole section of definitions that will be updated along with this.
Okay, thank you.
So then parking, it used to be 2 spots per dwelling, this would drop to 1. So the logic there, generally speaking, is every parking lot space created on a lot adds about $4,000 to $6,000 of cost, is what they guess in general. So from an affordability standpoint, it just adds cost, and, you know, I think in some of the older parts of town, in general, there's barely enough space for 2 per lot anyway at times. That could create challenges, obviously, with parking, but, you know, we often are parking heavy a lot of times in our regulations. So it just provides flexibility to drop from 1 to 2. You want to move on to R2? So so this is a conversion duplex that's on Watson. 2-unit building there that was converted, 507 Watson. So it's not something that is totally unheard of. But the R2 district is considered 1 and 2 family. The changes in front are proposed would be looking at conversion duplexes and new construction as allowed. So basically duplexes were allowed previously as new construction. They would also be allowed as a conversion. And then the addition there would be 3 or 4 unit dwellings, new construction, only 1 story, permitted via conditional use. So you could take a vacant R2 lot and put a single family home, a 2-family home, or a 3 or 4 family home with a conditional use on it, which would be different than current. Right now it is up to a 2-family duplex. Yes?
Could we go back to exterior storage on the off-street parking regulation one? Because I get calls on this all the time, monthly. And where it says nothing shall be stored in the required front yard, and it keeps on going. Does this address anything like on somebody's front porch, the outside of their front porch? And then it also goes on about children's toys, playground equipment, things like that. Lawn tractors seem to be very popular in Ripon, and lawn mowers. And I would imagine if it starts, they consider it working, so it could be parked in the front yard, you know? Is that the way you would see it?
So I think this is just a kind of a measure put in the zoning code that is also probably in other areas of the code for like nuisances and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Certainly, all things shall be kept in the building fully screened, so not to be visible from any public right-of-way. Okay, if somebody has a screened-in porch and they have a bunch of stuff inside of the screened-in porch and you can see it from the right-of-way, you know, it's inside. Is that better than it being outside? I guess that's up to Sue and to enforce that as need be. I probably know the property you're talking about that gets complained about quite a bit, and that's where this would fall into as a zoning code violation if they did that. Okay. So I think it's just kind of a blanket ordinance in there for enforcement purposes to cover again, the expectations that storage on residential properties is not something that becomes a nuisance or ugly or unsightly. So,
okay.
I don't, we have no changes to that.
Okay.
From the standpoint that, that's a good ordinance to have for those situations. And it's just enforcing it then, so.
Right.
And does it get to the threshold of enforcement? You know,
The one you're looking at is the same one in the code now. Exact same wording.
Exact same.
So,
Okay.
yep, that doesn't
Nothing
change.
is-
yeah, but disrepair and junk and
Yeah.
is the line.
Okay.
These items can be in the front yard, but they need to be in working condition and not disrepair.
So I think I may have sent out, I don't know if I did, the packet, but there may have been other ones that had like a Word document that tracked the changes, but, yeah, those weren't touched, so it's only very specific things.
Is there, are you aware of anything in the code as far as like steel shipping containers?
Is there anything in the code regarding steel shipping containers?
Yes. And is that something you can plant on your property indefinitely or not?
No, I think that is not something that would be allowed, from the standpoint of, generally speaking, trailers and shipping containers are accessory structures that are not considered permanent, because they are, you know, they can be moved and, you know, pretty easily. Now, the question becomes if somebody wanted to take a shipping container and turn it into a house, which
The
happens.
answer is no, you can't
Yes,
have
but this,
them except for,
the one I'm thinking in particular is
Temporary.
not on a foundation, it's not a
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
It's just planted in the driveway and it's been sitting there for years.
yeah, and that should be addressed.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not,
so if I just know where, if somebody lets me know. where it
portable
is.
is movable.
Yeah.
It's not a structure, and if it was, it need to fit within the code to be a structure, but it's not a structure.
Yes, because I understand the whole building with shipping containers
Yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
now, but this is not that.
Okay, so I was just wondering if you're going there. So somebody theoretically could bring in a shipping container if it was done correctly and put it in their backyard as an accessory dwelling unit. You know, is that, somebody also could weld together 16 of them and make a mansion like you've seen on TV. You know,
But I think where he's getting to
Yeah.
is there a time frame where
Yeah.
the shipping container can be temporary storage in your driveway? Is there a limit in the code for how long that is?
I'm satisfied that it's a short period of time, but I will look into that and talk
Okay.
with Sue about that.
Because the one that's not far from my house has
Yeah,
been there for
you-
years.
Got you.
and in a residential district, that shouldn't happen.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So R2, so we would be moving to a 3 to 4 unit dwelling, new construction, 1-story permitted, conditional, by a conditional use. The question there too is whether you wanted to include conversion, 3 or 4 unit dwellings. So the logic behind possibly allowing a conversion would be that case on that old church property. That would not be new construction. So by allowing a conversion, triplex or fourplex or whatever you want to call it, you could do that. I didn't put that in there because this is already a this could be a significant change to begin with. And you also don't want to have necessarily people taking, you know, big houses that are more suited for duplexes and turning them to fourplexes, because you could create challenges with parking and so on and so forth. So that's why we kept it out, but we can certainly put it in. So the height would be changed the same as R1. Front yard setbacks, I had a couple options there, just looking at it being similar to what would be done in R1. The other thing is you could just go simple and say 25 feet in the R2 district, which is better than the 30. Doesn't matter to me, you know, but we also would remove that, I believe that over 80 feet or less than 80 feet as well, and just go to 1 standard, and then the lot coverage would go to 40%.
I do have one question for clarification. On the 2 or 4 unit dwelling, a new construction 1-story, does that mean that each dwelling unit is on a 1-story, so you can't have a split level for each unit? And you can have apartment 1 on first floor, apartment 2 on second floor, apartment 3 on a third floor.
It would be one story, so it'd be like, it'd almost be like a condo type looking thing or a fourplex, like built right next to each other, side by side or back to
And you
back.
could never have multiple floors.
You would not have multiple floors. It'd be one story, so, you know, it would, yeah,
It'd be more like a set of townhouses together.
correct.
But even townhouses are multiple stories.
Correct, so each unit would be multiple stories, but they all start on the first floor.
Yes,
is what you're
correct,
saying.
yes, you are correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's
Yep.
the approach we're taking.
Yep,
So it can be a multi-story townhouse.
yep.
But each one has to have a ground floor.
And we can clean that up. I think that probably should be cleaned up to just either remove the one story because, you know, I think from the standpoint of if it's a 2-story duplex or a 2-story fourplex, you know, I think you bring up a valid point, yes. Because the way, yeah. So we can remove that if everybody's okay with that. That's fine. Or keep it in, to you.
And I personally don't see a problem with either the townhouse approach or first floor is one unit, second floor is another unit, third floor, if it's tall enough, is a separate unit.
I think the issue you run into there is if you're putting a unit on the second floor or third floor, then you're looking at, you'd never convert, for example,
But that
the
would-
State Street one without, because you'd probably need an elevator in it then.
But this is under the new construction line.
Oh, got it.
So if they're willing to either put in an elevator or a 3-story stairwell on both ends of the house, if they're willing to pay for that expense, I don't see a problem with it.
Are all multifamily regulated by the state?
I don't know.
Didn't we
Three-
determine it was four
Yeah.
or more?
3 units or more.
3 units
Three.
or more.
Or more, which is why I think why they're willing to do 2 then, because going to the state maybe
Yep.
wasn't
More
too
involved.
much for them to mess with.
Sprinklers and-
I mean, I think that's important in looking at the code, knowing that they can't just slap it together and put a stairway in the back. Yeah, you can get up there. Good
And I think that's the right approach with the conversion, to leave R2 at conversion duplexes and not go to the 3-unit, 4-unit, because you could be, you know, you don't want to have to sprinkle an old house.
I think that's been the issue in the past.
Yeah.
So that's why we're having this whole conversation, probably to begin with, so, yeah.
So then if you move to R3, one of the big changes there would be, you know, everything, you know, R3 is the multifamily, and any multifamily building requires a conditional use. The proposed change would say multiple family dwellings of 8 units or less would be allowed without a conditional use. Anything above 8 units would need to come for a conditional use. Logic there is mostly from a development standpoint of providing flexibility and not slowing something down necessarily or creating an obstacle for someone that wants to build a multifamily complex. Yes,
They still have to go to the state though, don't they?
yes, so they, but yes, so that,
But we would just kind of slide out of it, because it'd be all right with us.
yep. So an 8-unit would be allowed to be built. They would have to get all their state approvals, all of that stuff. They would have to meet all the criteria within the code, and they can put an 8-unit up without coming for a conditional use permit. Anything above 8 would go to a conditional use.
Just a thing to clean up here.
Mm-hmm.
The second line should be over 8 units, not 8 units or more. Because otherwise 8
Oh,
units
yeah,
falls
sorry.
into both.
Yep, got it. Okay. And that, there are some communities that have taken the approach that any multifamily does not need a conditional use. So you can go put up a 54 unit or 91 unit and you don't need any, it's just go ahead. You know, I think there is a value in reviewing large-scale residential development to ensure that things are being addressed prior to it happening. But 8 units likely is not getting to the threshold of massive amounts of concern. We could go less, we could go more. That's up to you. We just kind of picked a happy
Number.
1, 2, 4, 6, 8, yeah. Beyond that, the lot area dimensions would be moved down a little bit as well. Lot coverage would go to 40% like the others, and then again, the minimum usable floor would go from 500 to 600. So in that case, the smallest, studio, you would probably call it apartment, would be 500 square feet. But I don't know how many people are going to do that. It's going to be just dependent on the project. So there creates some flexibility there. The rest of the stuff is all pretty simple in terms of what's remaining in the code. We're not changing a lot of other things in the code. Everything's remaining sort of consistent with accessory dwelling units, height restrictions, parking restrictions throughout R1, R2, R3. And really, these 11, 12, 13 areas or 15 areas in the overall, 9, 10 pages of code, only a few places are being actually changed. So a lot of the language stays the same. Yeah.
So I have this question, and I'm kind of mulling it around in my mind. I might come up with the answer myself. So if there's an owner-occupied dwelling, and they're either living in the big house and renting out this accessory dwelling, or living in the accessory dwelling and renting out the house, when they die, what happens then? The tenants, do they have to get someone else to buy that? How is that going to work in practicality?
If we have if somebody lives in a house and they have an accessory dwelling unit in the back and we require owner occupied,
Yes.
the code would remain the same. So whoever buys it would have to have owner occupancy on that property.
Okay, well, that makes sense to me. And if they don't want to, then that's it.
Yeah.
So
It is
in the case where the property
kids'
sells,
house, dollhouse.
in the case where the property sells and the new owner doesn't want to live in the house but wants to rent it,
Can't.
will they be able to rent the entire property as one? Or is it completely, if the owner is not living in either one, could they rent neither?
Yeah, they could rent neither. They could just
They
say,
could rent
well,
neither.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it happens, but
And it doesn't even have
Short-term,
it doesn't even have
but
to
not
be
long-term.
rented, because you could just build it for your mother or father to live in, and you're not renting it to them. You're just having them move into the accessory dwelling unit. So the idea there is, I think, one of the two has to be occupied by the owner. If both are occupied by the owner, it's no big deal.
But if a future owner wants it as a rental property, would they be able to rent the entire property as one?
well,
Or
again, the concept is they're not supposed to. But we can get to boarding houses, bed and breakfast, and all the rest of the uses of homes.
because my thought here is,
But it's intended to be owner occupied, not,
but my thought here is, if a future owner,
yeah.
in
Well,
order
it-
to make it a rental, would they have to demolish the accessory dwelling unit? Or could it just sit empty?
It would, yeah, they're not, buying a home to rent it is not the intention
Yeah.
of an R1 district. If you're talking about a different district, then you're talking about homes that are intended to be. R1 is intended to be owner occupied.
And if there is
I
that
mean, I know it
case,
happens, I get it.
if there is that case, there would only be one tenant allowed on that property.
Right, but the tenant could have the entire
The
use.
entire yes. Yes. The only way you get 2 units or 2 tenants on a tenants or 2 users on a property is if the owner is there.
Okay.
Okay, so then if the owner then had the upstairs as an apartment, downstairs living, and at some point they wanted to move to, I don't know, Green Lake or someplace else, and they wanted to have tenants in both, they would have to come back and get a conditional use permit?
Not as a conversion duplex, no. So this is just for accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
This is for the extra grandmother suite or whatever you
Right,
want.
right,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to clarify that, if people out there may be listening or not, or don't care or not.
Yeah, I mean, we just had that situation happen
Right,
where there was an R1 that this just happened. Under this change, those people would have been able to convert that back to a duplex without rezoning it to an R2. So that just happened last month or the month December, or January, December. So. Okay, just to finish up here. So we have a couple other things that were noted in the code, and these are just two kind of simple changes. One of them's a little more complex, but the PUD or planned unit development zoning currently is at 5 acres. Planned unit development zoning, you can kind of see, is a concept of sort of picking or picking your own zoning. We would go from 5 acres down to 2. So somebody had a 2-acre parcel, or right now, if somebody wanted to do a unique build out, like condos, or, townhomes, or, small homes, or, a gated community, they need 5 acres. And from there, they would then come in and it's kind of like pick your own zoning as an overlay district. We would drop that down to 2 acres, and that just provides flexibility to maximize land space and possibly development on a parcel. But all of that would go through the planned unit development process, which is fairly extensive. It would just be dropping it from 5 acres to 2. All that does is provide flexibility.
Did that study ever get into pocket neighborhoods where you can get like 4 or 5 800 square foot homes on an acre of land?
That would be the idea of a planned unit development,
That
though?
would be, yeah,
So if you had 2 acres, you could do that concept.
but you would still need 2 acres.
You need 2 acres,
Is
yes.
that a minimum or a maximum number of units?
No,
Okay.
but we would, so right now it's 5.
Yeah.
And there are very few areas where there's 5 acres of land just sitting there. So we can go lower than 2 if you would like, that is fine. It's just, you do open yourself up to having a very densely, dense area. Yeah, like an acre, you can do a pocket neighborhood, like a little tiny homes, whatever you want to do on there. But that can get pretty packed in there pretty quick on an acre.
And some
So,
people like that.
Yeah.
In bigger cities.
Well, and I'll just, like, I was reading an article, in Green Lake, there's an idea right by Cristiano's Pizza there to put in a village through planned unit development, creating smaller homes, and they want to use PUD, and I think the parcel is only a couple acres big. It's not a large, so that's kind of the concept here. If you go 5 acres, you're almost, you're getting to the point where, that alone is restrictive. So.
The 2 acres is fine with me, as long as if somebody approached us and it was 1.5 acres or something, we could have some flexibility.
I think if you set it at 2, they can still apply for a variance, correct? I mean,
I would think so, yeah.
Really wouldn't be an appropriate use of variance, but
They'd have to show
But-
that.
we've seen other ones. But that isn't the intent of a variance. You're specifying, if you're talking about planned unit development, you've established the minimum,
It's 2
and the
acres.
minimum is the minimum.
The 2 acres is probably good because of the type of development that planned unit development wants to do. Okay, it's meant to basically provide flexibility within the zoning code as an overlay district to almost select your own zoning. And, on a 1 acre or under 2 acres, like I said, you can, you could get pretty packed in there, but. So the other thing was just cleaning up, what is referred to as tourist rooming houses. So currently in the code, in the R1 district, bed and breakfast or boarding houses are considered via conditional use. We have taken that approach and said Airbnbs and VRBOs, and that use needs to be done via a conditional use, which is not appropriate. A bed and breakfast or a boarding house is different than an Airbnb or a VRBO. They are just statutorily looked at differently. One is more of a full-time on-premises business where the person's living there all the time. The other one is a short-term rental while they're away, or whatever, just not a full-time bed and breakfast. So the struggle we have here, and I know, John, you have an Airbnb and we've talked about, yes. The whole concept here is to create a licensing requirement for tourist rooming houses. And those are defined as places of lodging other than commercial, indoor lodging, boarding houses, or bed and breakfast establishments which sleeping accommodations are offered to tourists or transients for short-term stays. So basically what we would be doing is applying the similar standard of a motel or hotel license to an Airbnb. And the reason that is too is from tracking purposes. We collect room tax. This would be in addition to the zoning code where there would be a license required. They are only allowed in certain districts, including R1, 2, R3, the central business district, commercial business district, neighborhood district. They wouldn't be allowed, say, at because right now we don't regulate them and we don't know where they are. So we don't know if we're totally collecting the appropriate tax, although we get a check saying, here you go, from a third party of Airbnb. So this just merely kind of, puts a standard in place. So if somebody wants to do this, and it is becoming more popular here, from the standpoint that I just have had in a year at least 3 or 4 calls from people wanting to buy houses because they have a kid at the college and they want to buy the house and come and visit, but then Airbnb it the rest of the time. So we have to start looking at this because every time that sort of situation happens, it could take away a property for single family use. This isn't going to go away. And applying a conditional use to that use in a district is not appropriate, as well as in the downtown business district, there are Airbnbs. They are being allowed under a motel hotel, but they are not motels and hotels. They are different. And so this just tries to bring that, kind of wrap that use in while we're doing this rest of this stuff. We can certainly do this separate, but it was just something that through the research and everything, I said, well, we're doing all this, we might as well clean up some other things. So. John?
My question is operating requirement A. The operator must hold the following non-expired license from the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. I get mine through Fond du Lac County. As Fond du Lac, I don't know if this Department of Ag is going to cross with Fond du Lac County, or if you have to do the Ag and the Fond du Lac County.
I think the Fond du Lac County one covers what you're talking about.
Okay.
And the idea there too is to ensure that the people are doing this do have the proper licenses, because at this point when anybody ever calls me about it, I forward them the brochure from Fond du Lac County saying here's what you have to do. But after that point I have no idea unless I go on Airbnb and stalk whoever might be doing it.
So are you going to require an Airbnb to turn in a copy of that license?
Yeah, so we would ask that be
Okay.
submitted annually. you know, this would mimic the hotel motel license that we do, which is like a business license. We charge $9.50 to run a hotel or motel. So it's by no means meant to be this.
You're too cheap. Flat County is $405.
Yeah.
Or $438 a year.
Yeah, and see, and they don't let us know, they don't, you know, so and part of this, the room tax side of things.
Right.
Is at least can begin to grapple, you know, with who may or may not be paying into the room tax, and as well as, you know, there are things in here like sale of alcohol, parking requirements, and just record retention, because right now it's just still, we're not really doing it. On top of, from a zoning perspective, there's nothing preventing somebody from flying under the radar and doing this in, say, it's crazy, it sounds, say, like on the campus or in an industrial district or in an inappropriate space. So.
More for record keeping on your end, I'm assuming, than anything else. And inspections and things like that too. Because I do a lot in Green Lake, and that is their, you know, that is their main thing, is making sure that it's run properly and proper neighborhoods. And I think, is that where?
So like, we're not gonna go in and inspect.
No, I know
as
that.
long as they have the required permitting.
Right.
I think the purpose of
That's
this
what
is
it's-
to know
right.
where they are.
Right.
So and the other thing is just from a nuisance standpoint, to know where they are, and if they become party houses.
Right.
You know, that happens quite a bit in communities, and I think that's right down the road that happens. And that creates problems for neighbors and neighborhoods. So just knowing where one is half the battle in this situation. Because currently, all I can do is go on Airbnb and, you know, see when I can rent somebody's, but that can be gone in a day.
Sure.
So,
And
so-
clearly, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Obviously, people are going to do this, clearly, and all we're doing is saying, okay, just be upfront that the activity is taking place. And I'm just curious, not to say we'd ever go there, are there communities that do restrict R1 activity to not include this?
I think there may
I think
be.
there would be, but I'm not suggesting we go there.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud, how does this play out in terms of essentially allowing it anywhere is what you're doing, and all you're looking to do is track it.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I'm not advocating for anything differently than that. I'm just recognizing that the party house question certainly would be a concern.
And there
A neighbor
are
who finds that
statutes.
the house is
Yeah.
being rented, but there is allegedly a limit of 180 days.
There is
for
yes,
this type
there
of
is that.
activity.
So there's, you know, so that would be something we'd have to look at too. But
Which I
that's,
guess is a limit.
that's the difference. That's then the difference between a conditional use permit for a bed and breakfast and a tour is 180 days. If you rent it out 180 days, you're under, it's a simple license. If it's over, you're a bed and breakfast and you have to come get a conditional use. That would be the idea.
Airbnb is onto it too. They know. I mean, their rules are pretty straightforward too. So there's a little bit of insurance.
Oh, I would assume there's some
policy, yeah.
self-policing going on.
Yeah, they've come a long way. Thank you.
Totally. And the state law has changed a lot. And I mean, the example is everything around Lambeau Field that
Yeah.
was, it used to be a house that now
Yeah.
is an Airbnb getting.
Exactly.
So, and this is just something to add. Certainly it's a big topic, you know, but it's just I just felt like it was an appropriate time to wrangle it in and get it taken care of within this effort.
With your records, is the intent, do you still want people that run an Airbnb quarterly to fill out?
Yes,
So maybe it should be better language on that in here, or?
So all this is meant for, like the record keeping side of this is not even meant for like us tracking room tax payments. What that is for is if somebody comes to town on a weekend, and all of a sudden, there's 6 places that have been burglarized.
Right.
And, you know, we know who, because a hotel or a motel has records of everybody that stays there. Airbnbs, they have that, but they're not, you know, this would put a requirement in that those hosts keep that list on file just in case there's an incident.
Right.
So we know, you know, our police department knows who was where, when. So,
And John, with the county tax or charge that they give you, is there an inspection of any sort annually with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a health inspection?
Yes, they come over and they go through the house and look at everything.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I don't know the exact, yeah, it's Fond du Lac County Health Department.
yep.
So that's.
So it would be interesting to see if that does track with the agricultural trade and consumer protection.
It does.
If it does.
I believe it does.
Okay.
So, and if not, we can,
You could add the language,
Add language
or
about
Fond du
Fond du
Lac
Lac
County.
County.
Yeah.
Or Fond du Lac County.
Right.
that's everything. So, you know, I'm open to whatever path you all want to take on any of this. If you want to, you know, go over it again, or you want to read through it or compare notes or whatever, that's fine. If you want to schedule a public hearing and go through that and make a recommendation to the council over the next month or so, we can do that. But this is kind of the first vetting of everything. There's no real, like, it's not like this is like life or death. I mean, but we've done the work up to this point, so.
I would think you put it back on the agenda, Sue will be here,
Yep.
and then have it one more time discussion.
I think
You've got it
that-
in
I
front
think
of
that would be
you.
appropriate.
Yeah, before we go to public hearing. There may be some thoughts that come up and say, can't do that, or shouldn't do that. So I think that's the appropriate next step
I
on
think with that
that.
being said, is that the presentation, Adam, can you just email that to us?
I can email it, yes.
That would be great, I'd appreciate that too.
All right. Any project updates, staff reports?
Nope.
Any future agenda items?
Other than the one we just did.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 7:59.